Today we're going to take a look at the Sainsmart disc and belt sander, which was provided to me by their buddy program for evaluation. It is a 2-in-1 device for belt and disc sanding that was shipped in pretty much all cardboard. No styrofoam, no extra plastic. There are two or three plastic bags for enclosing the disc and belt sander as well as the parts for it, but primarily cardboard packaging, which is nice to see these days. Minor assembly was required. 2 Allen screws are used to put the stop in place. 2 hand screws are used to position as well as adjust the work table for the disc sander. And there are 3 locking nuts on the bottom, 10mm locking nuts that you have to tighten to hold everything in place. I saw one review that noted that it's difficult in order to position everything with those loose locking nuts. Just tighten them 70%, most of the way, so you can still move things around, and then attach everything with the hand screws, and it's very easy to position. The sander comes with a 6-foot long extension cord. The sanding belt and disc pad material are provided. We'll take a look at how easy it is to swap out the disc as well as belt to replace them, as well as a couple of performance tests to see how this works. The speed available for the disc and belt sander is 2,000 to about 3,500 RPM. The digital display shows 3,450. I find that to be the greatest asset to this tool, is being able to slightly adjust your speed depending on the material you're working on: hardwood, softwood, metal, plastic, even if you're cleaning up 3D prints. Let's have a look at how this operates and some of the features for the Sainsmart disc and belt sander. The primary operation is just pressing the green button to start, red button to stop. A nice feature on the disc and belt sander is that the green button is recessed and the stop button, red button, is exposed, so that it's more difficult to turn on intentionally, less difficult to turn off. So if there was an emergency situation and you needed to turn it off quickly, you don't have to feel around for a switch or hunt for how to turn it off. It's pretty obvious. The largest button on the front that's easiest to reach, you can just press it to stop it. The sander has a 4-inch wide belt. That's a 36-inch loop, very standard size, easy to find replacements for, as well as a 6-inch wheel to work on. I have some material available now, so we can do some quick tests with the belt and disc. Some soft wood that I tested this out with previously, and then a piece of oak to see how well it works through and the impact it has on coloration when sanding at different speeds. I'm going to be operating this from behind the device. Makes it a little bit more difficult to use, obviously, but because of how this is oriented, it still works just fine. I'll be testing the disc from the front, and I'll try to stay out of the way and get some close-ups to get a better view of how this is operating. So we'll start with operating the belt. It's set at the lowest setting right now, which is 2,000 RPM, at least by the display. It may not be exactly that speed, but it gives you a good point of reference for how fast your belt and disc are moving. It moves through softwood very easily. It's recommended to steady yourself on the stop here when you're working, and having more than just a plate on the stop to rest your hand or rest your material makes it a lot easier and safer to work with. You have this entire area to steady yourself. The wheel is located below, running off the lower pulley, which is situated on the back here. The wheel is lower on the device than what you might see on an older disc or belt sander, where it's up higher on the top pulley. That can get in the way of moving material around, especially larger pieces of material. It also makes it a little bit harder to adjust and work if you're using this with a table or something. It moves through the softwood fine. It doesn't discolor it. Part of that is just the grit of the paper and working at lower speed. I'll turn this up to maximum speed next, and we'll see how it works through this 45-degree angle. And I'll also try to round out the end of this a little bit more smoothly, just to see how it works. I'm going to turn up the speed for this to 2,600 RPM. It definitely cuts through material more quickly at a higher speed without discoloring it. It also creates a lot more dust, but that lets us showcase one of the features of this. It has a dust collection port that you can hook up to a shop vacuum. Let me grab mine, I'll hook it up. The vacuum just connects to the port on back. It's a little loose for my vacuum, but if I was going to set this up at my table, I'd probably just run a piece of duct tape around the inside to tighten it up. All right, so working through the softwood, it does, at a higher speed, you can move pretty quickly and get really even results. And there's no discoloration on softwood even at 2600 RPM. That's pretty basic stuff. Let's have a look at how it works with oak. All right, we're back behind the sander. I'm gonna make sure I still have it set for 2600 RPM. And right now the oak is a little discolored from testing it on my old belt sander, which has a set speed. Being able to adjust your speed here, we'll start at 2600 and maybe see if we want to bring up the speed or lower the speed to get the results we want. I'll use the dust collection in the shop vacuum as well. All right, at 2600 RPM, here's the end that I just sanded. It does darken the wood just a little bit going through the grain, but I think it's quite acceptable if you look at how dark this side is from my older belt sander. Turning it up to higher RPM moves through the wood more quickly. The controls are really easy to use. They'd be even easier to use if I was standing in front of it. Overall, I think using this is a 5 out of 5. When it comes to making adjustments on the belt sander, you have to use the supplied Allen key on a single Allen bolt to adjust the angle of your belt surface. The stop, once you get beyond about 45 degrees, makes it more difficult to tighten. So you can adjust your work surface for projects you're working on, or if you're working on a table and you're feeding material into it, if you have to do a lot of work at a certain angle. As far as replacing the belt, the process is pretty simple. Unplug the mains. You would loosen the arm and put it into a raised position so you can remove the panel on the bottom. Then there are 2 screws on the rear to loosen. You release tension with this arm, and then you slide the belt off. The whole process takes about 5 minutes to replace the belt, including realigning the belt so it stays centered. Phillips head screwdriver is needed. Loosen the 2 screws just a little bit. Remove the plate on the bottom. Get it out of your way. I guess you can do that to clean out dust as well. Lift the tensioner, arm, lever, slide your belt off, get your new belt, slide it back on, and one nice feature, because it's not enclosed, you can see where the belt sits on the back wheel. Clearly, it's not covered up. On previous sanders I've used, it's been covered up. Close the tensioner, replace the plate. Tighten 2 screws. And you're done. I'll lower the arm back into a horizontal position here. So I can tell by running the belt manually that it's starting to move off center. Recentering the belt just requires turning the knob, which adjusts the pitch of the wheel. And that's it. Replaced the belt, kept it running straight, centered on the wheels now. As far as the difficulty for changing a belt, I'd say 5 out of 5, 4.5 out of 5. I give it a 5 out of 5 if it didn't require a tool to loosen the Allen key to adjust the angle, but that's pretty common. In fact, my previous device required adjustment for 2 arms and 3 fasteners, 1 hand screw and 2 bolts that had to be adjusted. So that I'd probably give a 1.5 or 2, 4.5 for this one, just because you have to have 2 tools, including a screwdriver. Now we should have a look at how the disc sander works. Controls are the same, both operate off the same motor. The disc sander has a working table that's pretty easy to set level. I used a carpenter's quick square to set everything square, both perpendicular to the work surface, horizontally and vertically. That way I can use the markings that go from 0 to 60 degrees in either direction to set an angle, and I know it'll be pretty close. The table itself is larger than many other small disc and belt sanders that I've seen. It gives you plenty of room to work, and it's a smooth surface instead of having ridges or texture or useless markings on it. It's just a flat, smooth surface that makes it very easy to work with your material on. When you are working on it, you should always work from left to center. Once you go past the center mark, there's a chance that it could be, because of the direction that it spins, you could lift your material and push it back at you. That's definitely the better way to work with a smaller piece of material like this when you want to round off an edge. It works really quickly, sanded really smoothly around the cut edge of the test piece. It works really well. Of course, it's brand new, but it has a nice metal disc with a thick plate that you're working on. So it's a very stable sanding surface to work on and a very stable work surface. Next, I'm going to set it to what 45 degrees looks like on the guide, working from left to center. If you're doing a lot of trim work or you're using soft pine or craft wood especially, it just does such a fantastic job on a large surface with even controls and a flat table to work on. For the oak, I am going to turn on the shop vacuum. On the disc, it does discolor the oak, the hardwood, a little bit more. This is after working on the disc. That could just be the direction of the wheel turning. It's still not as dark as the sanding from my old disc sander. Let's see if we can take off some of that discoloration, and I'll lower the speed. In general, I'm still pretty impressed. How easy this is to use and its relatively low price point makes it a pretty attractive device. Let's have a look at how easy it is to change out the sanding disc. First, I'm going to disconnect the mains, take off the guide. You have to remove both hand screws. That's also where your adjustability comes from. The pin in the casting on the left side when you're looking at an arm is the point of pivot for the work table. And with the tightening screws, positioning screws tightened, you do have to pull it away. It would be easier to remove by loosening these, but then getting everything square and put back together, you'd have to make adjustments to those 3 assembly screws. Once the protective plate is exposed, use a screwdriver again, and these screws have to be fully removed, at least to change the disc. While I am loosening these for the disc, I'll show you there's this adjustable cover, so you can expose more of the wheel if you want, depending on the angle that you're working on with the table. So this is adjustable. But to replace the disc, you remove both these screws. The screws thread into plastic, so you want to be careful when you are tightening them that you don't strip the plastic. I mean, plastic versus thin metal, you can strip both of them pretty easily. So the internal cover plate has a bevel to match the bottom of the housing here. And it does have a cutout to make it a little bit easier to get that screw in and out. So I guess if you wanted to, you could work without the second plate in the way, but I like the adjustability of it and keeping more of it covered up if necessary. Once the sanding material is exposed, you just peel off the old paper, replace it with a new piece, and then reassemble it. This would definitely be easier from the other side of the table. Put the table back on, first putting the pin on the left-hand side, and then moving the other side, the right-hand side into position, and then hunting for the hole for the hand screws. Get that one started. Get this one started. I don't have my carpenter square handy right now, but I would just make sure that it is perpendicular to the sanding surface. Although I found that the level, the leveling pin here is pretty close to perpendicular, which is nice having that set from the factory. And of course, adding time to remove and replace the sanding pad would add a minute or two, but the whole process again is 5 minutes. No special tools other than a screwdriver. You don't need the Allen key or anything, only a screwdriver is needed for this, so keep that handy or have your pocket knife or your multi-tool ready. I'd give that 4.5 out of 5. Makes it pretty easy to swap out your material, sanding discs. Let's have a look at the construction. It is mostly metal, stamp cut and bent. All of the fasteners are either Phillips head screws or Allen keys, or there's some metric lock nuts. No specialty or safety screws to get in your way. Makes it pretty easy to work on. The plastic pieces are not structural. They are there purely for aesthetics, and it does make it easier to keep clean, you know, stuff getting into nooks and crannies. And there's not any surprise sharp edges when you're working. There's a thin metal plate covering the electronics on the inside, but it is accessible if necessary. The dust removal port fits a standard shop vacuum. During assembly, the only parts that have to be added by you are the stop, which has 2 Allen screws to fasten it here and here. That's the same Allen key size as you have for the Allen screw that you use to loosen the arm for the belt. So single Allen size to worry about. You don't have multiple keys to worry about. It's pretty easy to move around. I am going to put this onto a work stand because I fully intend to use this all the time. I think it's a great device, especially for the price. I think right now they are about $150 US. Sainsmart does have sales. They did provide this to me to evaluate, which I appreciate, so I didn't have to pay that, but I would. I definitely would. When you're comparing this to something that you'd get from a local hardware store, it'd probably be similar price for something this size or more expensive, but without the speed controls. If you're going to a discount store that sells things by freight from the harbor, you could probably get something that has similar functionality with a lot less control for slightly less money. So for the difference in cost, if I had this option available to me at the time, a decade ago, when I bought mine, I definitely would have chosen this. I do have several other Sainsmart tools that I use frequently, so I'm familiar with the brand and their support. They're very responsive, and they're a great resource for the maker community with the tools that they make at the price points that they have them available. Overall, it's really well built. It's not too heavy to move around if you have limited working space in a workshop. It's primarily metal for all of the structure. It has plastic coverings for aesthetics. It uses a standard size 4-inch by 36-inch belt, a 6-inch adhesive wheel. You can get those at any hardware store, and I really like the speed adjustment being built in with a display for reference. Also, bonus points for these controls again. I love that the stop button is proud. It sticks out a little bit. It's very easy to get to. Even when I was behind it, I could feel for which one I could use to turn it off. And the power button is recessed. It's harder to get to, so you're not accidentally going to turn it on, and it won't turn on accidentally when it's unplugged. So if you plug it in, you don't get a surprise. Some nice safety features. There's 3 points to mount this to a work table or a stand. And when it starts, because it ramps up to speed, it doesn't suddenly jolt to top speed if you have it set up all the way to almost 3,500 RPM. If you like this content, of course, I'd appreciate you subscribing and liking the video. I do have another channel called Tiger Bomb Tech. That's linked in the description. If you want to check that out, that covers old computers, technology in general. This channel is primarily has been supporting my race car hobby. I run in an SCCA race group called Spec Racer Ford, and I have a lot of videos through second and third generation races in the region that I race. I'll have more videos about maintaining the race car, doing work on the fiberglass body, as well as other projects in my shop. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I appreciate it.